Welcome to Lecture 2 of BRITE Old Testament 800, Ugaritic. In this lecture, we'll be taking a look at nouns. Ugaritic nouns decline, that is, there are declensions of nouns where the endings of the nouns will change depending on their use in the sentence, depending on their gender, and depending on their number. These are the three markings of a Ugaritic noun, all of which can be found and determined from the last few letters of that particular noun. Ugaritic nouns are marked first for case, and there are 4 cases, although there are only 3 case endings. Nominative, or what we call subjective in English, are used to indicate words that are typically used as the subject of a particular sentence. I, for instance, is in the subjective case in English. Me cannot be used as the subject of a clause or a sentence, and so is not in the subjective case. The nominative case works the same way as the subjective, so that I, in the sentence, I threw the ball of rubber to Steve, I would be in the nominative case. Genitives often have the word of associated with them, and will indicate source or a characteristic of a particular object or even possession. So in the sentence, I threw the ball of rubber to Steve, of rubber would be in the genitive case because it describes the type of ball. If this was the ball of Steve or Steve's ball, then Steve would be in the genitive case to indicate possession. A dative case is used to indicate the indirect object. In the sentence, I threw the ball of rubber to Steve, Steve is the indirect object, who I was throwing the ball to. The dative case can also be instrumental in the sense that it tells the means or the instrument by which something is accomplished, or words, nouns having to do with time. Accusative case is the direct object. What did I directly throw? I threw the ball of rubber to Steve. So the ball would be in the accusative case. However, in Ugaritic, genitive and dative case endings are identical, so that we really only have 3 case endings, but 4 cases. There are, however, those nouns in Ugaritic that we call diptote that only use 2 case endings. They mark the nominative case, and then genitive, dative, and accusative all use the same case endings. There are still 3 cases, but they are marked the same, and only context will tell us which case is in focus. Ugaritic nouns are also marked for gender, male or female. There is no neuter gender in Ugaritic, as there is in some ancient languages. The words that are marked as male or female are not actually male or female, but are simply considered masculine or feminine depending on the structure of the word. We use these same ideas in English as well, where we have some words that are considered feminine, even though they're not really feminine. For instance, boats are always feminine, ideas are typically feminine, such as Lady Liberty, and even the earth is feminine, Mother Earth, not Father Earth. However, we all know that boats don't really have gender, that Liberty is not really a lady, and that the earth is not really female. But we do the same in English, where we have certain words that are feminine or masculine. In Ugaritic, we actually mark those nouns so that there are masculine endings and feminine endings that are put on particular nouns. And then finally, Ugaritic nouns are marked for number. They are either singular or plural or dual. Singular is 1, plural is more than 1, dual is 2. So for instance, if we were talking about legs, we might use the dual because we have 2 legs. If we were talking about getting crab legs, then we might use the plural because there's more than 2. Thankfully, in Ugaritic, there is no Ugaritic definite article, so we don't have to worry about the definiteness being marked. However, as great as it is not to have more case endings to add to our list to mark definiteness, we still have to determine definiteness, only it's determined by context and not by marking. Fewer markings, but more interpretive work later on. So this is how Ugaritic marks its nouns. Case, how it's used in the sentence. gender, male or female, and number, singular, plural, or dual. Ugaritic nouns are found in two states. A state is simply the condition or the quality of a particular noun. Nouns are found in two states in Ugaritic, the first of which is absolute. Absolute means that these are just boring, run-of-the-mill, normal, everyday nouns. This table gives the chart of Ugaritic noun endings in the singular, the dual, and the plural number, in the masculine and feminine genders, and in the absolute state, nominative, genitive and dative being the same, and the accusative. You'll notice that the feminine is formed by adding an A and a T to the beginning of the masculine ending, so that in masculine nominative we have U, but in feminine nominative we have atu, A-T-U rather than just U. The same is true in the dual absolute. The masculine nominative is AMI with a long A. The feminine nominative absolute dual is ATAMI. When we come to the absolute plural, the masculine nominative is UMA, UMA with a long U. You'll notice that this is a little different than in the feminine. We have the AT, but instead of having UMA, we just have the U. The long is not over the U any longer. Now it is over the A. ATU with a long A. This chart shows the difference between the nominative, the genitive dative, and the accusative case endings, and the difference between the singular, the dual, and the plural in both the masculine and the feminine. This is the absolute endings. Ugaritic nouns are also found in a second state, the construct state, or what is sometimes called the bonded state. In the construct state, nouns are bonded together to form chains, with each noun being related to the noun following. A construct chain contains unlimited nouns in the construct state. You can build a chain of as many construct nouns as you want, but there will only ever be one absolute noun, and there will always be at least one absolute noun, which comes last in the chain. For instance, the first of the men of the city would have the word first and the word men in the construct state, and city, being the last word in the chain, would be in the absolute state. Now, in several Semitic languages, the construct chain is the way that words are bonded together. But in several other ancient languages, the genitive case ending is used to bond words together. Ugaritic uses a combination of the two. In a construct chain, every word after the implied word of is in the genitive case, whether it is one of the construct nouns or the absolute noun at the end of the chain. So in our example sentence, the first of the men of the city, men and city would both be in the genitive case, since they come after the first of. The word first would actually have its case determined by the use of the word first in the sentence. For instance, if the first of the men of the city was to be the subject of the sentence, then the first would be in the nominative case, since that is the case for subjects. The first did such and such. Of the men of the city are bonded to that word first. Thus, men and city would be in the genitive, or in that bonded case, having those case endings, and yet still in a construct chain, to show us that all three words are related one to the other. This is the complete chart of Ugaritic noun endings, with both the absolute and the construct states. You'll notice that in the absolute and the construct of the singular masculine and feminine nouns, the endings are identical. There is no change between the absolute and the construct. This is great because there's fewer endings to memorize. This is a negative because we have to interpret nouns based on context to see if they're in the construct. In the dual absolute and construct, in the masculine and the feminine, the mem ending is dropped. This is not always the case, because life would not be fun without exceptions. So typically we will drop the mi of the absolute masculine and feminine dual ending, but occasionally you will still see a mem even in the construct, so keep that in mind. But for the most part, the mi drops, leaving simply the vowel behind. In the plural absolute and construct, masculine, you will notice that the ma has dropped, and yet in the feminine, the ending is identical, where we have the long a and the t, and then the vowel, in both the absolute and the construct. As a rule of thumb, construct is simply formed by dropping the mem ending. If there is no mem ending, as in the absolute construct of the singular, then there is going to be no difference between absolute and construct. When the mem comes into play, however, in the dual absolute and the plural absolute of the masculine, then the construct will drop that mem ending, leaving just the vowel behind. That brings us to the end of this particular lecture. Not a very long lecture, but a lot of new information that is quite different from English. Be sure that you understand the three ways in which Ugaritic nouns are marked, as well as the purpose and function of the construct state, and how this is used within an actual sentence. Then memorize the chart so that you can use it to identify and to mark nouns in a sentence.